What's going on, guys? I'm Jesse, and I'm a student.
Hi guys, this is Trek from MDFI, and I'm an instructor.
What's going on, guys? Jesse from Practically Tactical here, and I'm with Trek from MDFI. TrainMDFI.com. Be sure to check them out. Today we wanted to kind of talk about expectations of not only the student going into a firearms training class, but also the instructor. As you guys know, me and Nick have taken a ton of training this summer with a lot of reputable instructors, and one thing that I've kind of taken away from that is I have some expectations of you as I come out. You know, we're paying good money. We want a good show put on, but not so much just a hang out with the cool guys, but also a good learning environment. And I think there's some key things that go along with that. And from a firearms instructor's point of view, you have some expectations of the students.
Absolutely.
As well, right?
You know, you guys have come to quite a few classes this summer, and as an instructor, I absolutely have expectations of our students, and I think it's great to have a nice conversation, a dialogue about what I can do for you and what you should be doing for me. And that way, with that relationship, you guys will be set up for success when you show up to, if it's your first firearms training class.
All right, guys, so we're going to start with some of the students' perspectives. You know, coming into these training classes, there's certain things that you want to look for, and I think one of the biggest things is AARs, checking out AARs on the internet on the instructors, because what it does is it gives you a chance to see what other normal people just like you took away from that class. You're going to see, you know, what is kind of the doctrine of the class, and you're going to be able to compare that with the prerequisites going into the class. I don't know, there's not much of an AAR on students, but how do you kind of vet your students to get into the class?
Yeah, you know, as far as you bring up a good point about after-action reports, they're very important. One of the things that we tell our students is, at the end of the day, it's not about the instructors. It's certainly that the students can put down what they learn, because you're going to brain dump 50, 60% within the next 24, 72 hours of the stuff that you went over. So when you get home, start putting that information out. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of people that put those stuff up on social media on different forums so they can be read, because that after-action report might be that key bit of information that's going to get a responsible citizen into some sort of training, and it also lets them know, where's my money going? And that's very, very important. We know that, especially in today's economy, especially when you're putting the money into a good handgun, a good holster, a good belt, the ammunition for a class, possible lodging, you need to make sure that your money's going to a good source. When it comes to the instructor's point of view with the student, one of the best things that we ask of the students is you got to go to that website, you've got to go to that information about the classes that you're going to, and you have to look at the course description, and you need to look at the course requirements, and that's a huge one. You know, what are the holster types that are allowed? And there's a lot of instructors out there right now that have some very specific requirements when it comes to the holsters and handgun classes that students are wearing, and then we have students that show up to those classes with the wrong type of holster, and therefore they can't meet the prerequisites of the class, and then they can't get the training they deserve. So definitely read up if you're the student, just like an AAR, to check out me. Read those course descriptions so that I can make sure when you show up to my class that I can train you and we don't have to worry about you being ready for the class.
No, I think that's a really good point. You know, some of the other things that I look for as a student, you know, it used to be a big thing for me would be background on people. It was always, you know, what has this person done beforehand? And, you know, upon taking a lot of training, I've really found that I've gotten away from that. You know, it's not necessarily what the person's background is, you know, military, law enforcement, along those lines. It's where they've kind of come from as a student themselves. So one question I like to ask instructors is, what classes have you taken, you know? And I think that really sets it up for a good dialogue to let them know, you know, that you're curious more on when's the last time they were a student as well, because I feel like to be a good instructor, you have to be a good student.
Absolutely. You know, we are, as instructors, if you're not a student, you've got problems. My last class, it wasn't a firearms class. It was actually a tracking class with Freddie Asuna from Greenside Training. As a whole, we talk about that whole person concept. I can't just do firearms training all the time. Firearms training is great, certainly valuable, but we need to work on our medical skills like Dark Angel Medical. I'm happy to have taken that class, the 2-day tactical aid course, and we need to make sure that we're having our medical training, our firearms training, our hand-to-hand training, if applicable, for our defensive posture. But you're absolutely right. When it comes to the students, we talk about prerequisites. We're not only asking the students, there's some courses that you don't need a background. You might just need a CPL, your concealed pistol license or concealed weapons license, or you just have to have a letter from a local law enforcement officer stating that you have a background and you are lawfully allowed to carry and own a firearm, just to make sure that we're not training the bad guy, and that's a big one. But then we have courses such as our 2-day home defense class, where you have to have a foundation-based class where you know how to manipulate your weapon. We have a movement and cover class, you know how to move and you know how to use cover, and a low light class, you know how to incorporate artificial light with your weapon in that type of environment. Then we can train you in a 360-degree shooting environment. And what we see out there a lot are people that don't meet the prerequisites that show up, and they're doing themselves a disservice, because even if they say, hey, I have those prerequisites, the instructors can tell it brings down the tempo of the class, and the student at the end of the day is cheating themselves because they're building too big on a poor foundation. That's huge.
No, I think that's a great segue to my next point, which would be the ego of the instructor. You know, I don't take the training class to show up and be with the cool guy. You know, that's not my my forte. I want to come and I want to actually learn. And, you know, with these training classes, you find a lot you're pushed outside your comfort zone. You're making mistakes. You're getting vapor lock of the brain because, again, it's drinking from that fire hose type moment. And you're learning a lot of information you didn't know before. You may be learning new ways of doing something that takes and actually breaks down an older way that you'd been taught before. And, I mean, you're constantly being confused. So I don't want to be the guy getting screamed at basic training style while I'm trying to learn. I just feel like for me, you know, that's not the best learning environment. So I really look at the ego of not only the instructor, but the class tempo as well, because again, you don't want where, I mean, you're going to find where you give your buddies a little bit of crap here and there on what they do, but you don't want to go home at the end of the day feeling bad about yourself from taking a training class and spending that money.
Yeah, you know, you've got a great point there. There are schools out there that have that type of learning environment. We're all different types of learners. Well, it's tactile learning. We feel it and we learn it. There's audible, there's visual. There are people out there that are going to benefit from a very high stress class. And it's important, just as you mentioned during the AARs, find out if that's the type of class for you. When it comes to the students, from an instructor point of view, it's a matter of showing up to the class with the attitude to learn. It does us no good as an instructor if we have a student who sits there with their arms crossed right at the opening briefing and looks like, hey, I was drug out of bed at gunpoint, I don't want to be here, and we can't understand because they paid very good money to be there. So having that open attitude to say, hey, I'm here to learn, at the end of the day, if they don't take the stuff that we taught them because they tried it, they don't like it, it doesn't work for them, but they kept an open attitude, we can not only teach them or try to teach them, but the rest of the class all gets along and it makes the day that much better. So attitude from the student's perspective is also very, very important.
Okay, so I think that's a great segue to, you know, what I feel is probably the most important aspect as a student looking for is class safety. I feel like, obviously, if you're in an environment that you don't feel safe, you're not going to learn. And especially coming from your guys' class, you always put on a really safe, super awesome show. And, you know, how do you feel about safety of the student?
Well, first of all, instructors have to be safe. They have to run a safe program. Those 4 life safety rules, if the cadre doesn't have them, you need to pack your stuff and you need to leave immediately. There's tragic stories, even from the state of Michigan, where we have instructors ending in a classroom in a CPL class. That right there should be the end of a career. You're teaching firearm safety to people that are going to put a gun on for the first time, and you can't even adhere to those safety rules, firing around in the classroom. Hopefully, it's just an ND without injuries, but we've heard stories all over this country of instructors making incredibly reckless and negligent choices and causing injury to people that don't deserve it, and that's huge. But from a standpoint of a student, you need to make sure that before you show up to a class that you know, understand, and apply those 4 life safety rules of firearms handling. You need to make sure that at all times, no matter how stressed out you might get, that as a grown adult, you can say, hey, I'm learning, I'm stressed out, and I'm thinking I might do something unsafe. I understand those 4 life safety rules, so I'm just going to go ahead, safe and holster, maybe raise my support hand in the air, let the instructors know, hey, I still want to learn, not feeling too good about my safety threshold right now, I need to take a step off the line. If you have instructors that want you to still do it when you think you're going to be unsafe, excuse yourself, pack your stuff up and leave, because you need to make sure that you stay safe above all else, because at the end of the day, if you ND around, it's on you. So just make sure that not only the instructor cadre are incredibly safe, but when we go to a class as a student, we need to make sure that we are not going to be a liability to ourselves, the instructor cadre, or any of our fellow students.